The late afternoon sun dipped low behind the skyline, casting long shadows over the bustling downtown. The Grand Imperial Hotel, a towering structure of limestone and glass, stood like a monument to wealth and elegance. Its massive revolving doors gleamed with polished brass, catching the golden light in a way that made the whole entrance seem like the cover of a glossy travel magazine. A sleek black executive sedan slowed to a stop beneath the porte cochere. The rhythmic purr of its engine broke the hum of the city street. Valets in immaculate uniforms moved quickly and precisely, like a choreographed performance, opening car doors, whisking luggage away, greeting arriving guests with practiced warmth. From the back seat, Marcus Bennett stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, and effortlessly composed, he wore a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit that draped over him like it had been made for his frame alone. A crisp white shirt peeked beneath the jacket, open at the collar without a tie, suggesting a man who valued comfort as much as style. In his right hand, he carried a slim, black leather briefcase, not a single other bag in sight. The air was warm but breezy, carrying the faint scent of the fresh flowers from the enormous arrangement inside the lobby. A doorman in a peaked cap moved toward him with a welcoming nod. "Good evening, sir. May I take your bags?" Marcus smiled faintly, shaking his head. "No, thank you. I've got everything I need." The doorman stepped back respectfully, but his eyes lingered for a split second on the absence of luggage, a small, almost imperceptible flicker of curiosity before his professional mask returned. Marcus paused just before the entrance, taking in the hotel in a slow, deliberate sweep. The architecture was opulent without being gaudy. Carved stone pillars, intricate wrought iron accents, and enormous glass panels that reflected the city's pulse. Through the glass, the lobby revealed itself, gleaming white marble floors, a grand chandelier dripping with crystal, and guests milling about in designer suits and dresses. The moment he crossed the threshold, the hotel's sensory experience enveloped him. Soft piano music floated from a corner lounge. The scent of white tea and cedarwood diffused from hidden vents. The marble under his shoes was cool, but muted enough to keep footsteps from echoing. Clearly a choice meant to make the lobby sound calm, not busy. Marcus scanned the room with an expert's eye. He had built his career on noticing details others missed. The flicker of a bulb in an overhead light, the uneven polish on a section of floor, the subtle shift in a staff member's body language. This wasn't just a guest arriving, it was a quiet inspection. He wasn't here to visit, he was here to see. In the far corner, two businessmen laughed over cocktails. Near the elevators, a family posed for a picture in front of a mural of the city skyline. And straight ahead, at the reception desk, a woman in a sharp navy blazer typed briskly at her computer while speaking to a departing guest. Her gold nameplate caught the light. Amanda. Marcus began walking toward the desk, the subtle weight of his briefcase swinging gently at his side. The lobby's energy shifted around him. No one knew it yet, but the man they were about to meet had more authority over this building than anyone else in the room. And yet, he didn't want them to know that. Not yet. This visit wasn't about ceremony or handshakes. It was about seeing how the staff treated someone they assumed was just another man off the street. He reached the desk and waited patiently as Amanda finished her current interaction. Her voice was light, polite, but her eyes, Marcus noticed, did not fully smile. When the guest left, Amanda turned toward him, her gaze flicking quickly from his face to his briefcase, then to his lack of luggage. "Good evening," Marcus said in a calm, deep voice. "I'm here to check in." Amanda smiled, but it was the kind of smile that looked more like a reflex than genuine warmth. "Of course," she replied, already typing. "Do you have a reservation?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, Bennett." Her fingers paused for a fraction of a second over the keyboard. Then she resumed typing. "One moment, please." Marcus stood quietly, watching her work, the faintest trace of curiosity in his eyes. He knew from experience that in the next 60 seconds, her tone and body language would tell him everything he needed to know about the culture of this hotel. And soon enough, it would. Amanda's perfectly manicured fingers tapped against the keyboard as she searched for Marcus's reservation. Her expression was calm on the surface, but her eyes carried that subtle, evaluating flicker. the kind that scans a person from head to toe in a fraction of a second and files them neatly into an assumption. Marcus stood still, posture relaxed but alert, watching every micro-expression. She typed his last name, hit enter, and frowned at the screen for just a second too long. She murmured, as if speaking to herself, but loud enough for Marcus to hear. I'm not finding anything under Bennett. He kept his tone even. It should be there. I booked through the corporate portal. Amanda gave a small, polite laugh, the kind people use when they think they know the truth but don't want to say it out loud. Corporate bookings. Sometimes those are handled differently, she said carefully, as though explaining a basic process to someone who'd never traveled before. Marcus simply nodded, offering nothing more. Then came the shift, the moment her voice and body language betrayed her assumption. She leaned slightly to the side, lowering her voice in a way that felt less like confidentiality and more like condescension. Sir, she began, if you're here on behalf of a delivery or a service appointment, we actually have a separate entrance in the back of the building. It's easier for that sort of access. For a fraction of a second, Marcus didn't react. His eyes stayed steady on hers. The only movement was the slow blink, deliberate, measured, an unspoken, "Did I just hear that right?" He let the words hang in the air. Amanda seemed not to notice the weight of them. She went on, still smiling that polished, empty smile. It's just a little less busy back there, so it would be faster for you. Marcus took a slow breath, keeping his voice level. And what sort of access do you think I need? Amanda's cheeks colored slightly, but she recovered quickly, still clinging to the narrative in her head. Well, you mentioned corporate, but you don't seem to have a reservation in the guest system, and usually, well, she trailed off, eyes darting toward the service hallway that led to the back. Behind Marcus, a couple waiting in line glanced toward the exchange, curiosity sharpening their features. The tension in the air shifted, subtle but perceptible. Marcus's gaze didn't waver. You're suggesting I use the service entrance because you think I don't belong here as a guest? Amanda's smile faltered for the first time. No, that's not what I meant, she said quickly, but her tone lacked conviction. Then what did you mean? His voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable steel underneath. Before Amanda could answer, the lobby's glass doors opened, and a gust of cool air swept in with another guest. The moment was interrupted, but the tension remained. Amanda straightened her blazer and pressed her lips together. Let me get the general manager for you, she said finally, her voice tight. Marcus gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Yes, he said quietly. You do that. She picked up the phone, dialing with fingers that moved just a little too fast, as if to escape the weight of the conversation. Marcus remained exactly where he was, not moving, not breaking eye contact until she looked away. Around them, the lobby buzzed on, guests checking in, laughter from the bar, the clink of glassware. But in that corner of the reception desk, the air had turned cold and heavy. This was exactly the kind of moment Marcus had been looking for, and exactly the kind of moment Amanda would come to regret. The receiver clicked gently back into place as Amanda hung up the phone. Her professional smile had returned, but it sat awkwardly on her face now, like a mask slightly out of alignment. The general manager will be right out, she said, her tone smoother than before but lacking genuine warmth. Marcus nodded once, standing calmly with his hands loosely clasped in front of him. He could feel the curious eyes of the couple behind him in line. They weren't hearing the full conversation, but they'd seen enough to know this wasn't a standard check-in. From a side door behind the desk, a tall, silver-haired man in a perfectly pressed suit emerged. Richard Larkin, the general manager. His steps were brisk, his expression composed but faintly irritated, the face of someone summoned from a meeting for what he assumed would be a minor disruption. Amanda straightened slightly and spoke in a lowered tone, though not low enough to keep Marcus from hearing every word. This gentleman doesn't seem to have a reservation in our guest system, and he mentioned corporate. I thought perhaps... She glanced briefly toward the service hallway, leaving the rest unsaid. Richard's eyes flicked toward Marcus, with a polite but distant acknowledgement, the kind reserved for strangers you're not sure you need to impress. Sir, he began, I understand there's been some confusion. If you're here for a business delivery or facilities matter, our service entrance is just around the side. Marcus's voice cut in, calm but firm. And if I'm not here for a delivery? Richard hesitated only for a moment, but enough for Marcus to see the wheels turning behind his composed exterior. Well, the manager said, choosing his words carefully, without a confirmed booking, I'm afraid I can't check you in through the guest desk. I have a confirmed booking, Marcus replied evenly. It was made through the corporate portal. Richard's polite smile thinned. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing it in our current system. These things happen. It might be better for you to speak with the corporate offices directly. He gestured vaguely toward the phone on the desk. Marcus didn't move. So your solution, he said slowly, is to send me away, without checking any further, because your system doesn't immediately show my name. Richard exhaled through his nose, the faintest sign of impatience. Sir, I'm not sending you away. I'm simply suggesting a more appropriate point of entry for corporate matters. There it was again. The assumption. Appropriate, Marcus repeated, letting the words sit in the air between them. His voice stayed steady, but the single word carried a quiet weight. Richard clasped his hands in front of him, as if to signify the conversation was nearing its conclusion. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, truly, but without a visible reservation, there's nothing more I can do from here at the main desk. A small silence followed, thick enough for Amanda to glance away, her eyes fixed on the computer screen in an exaggerated display of busyness. Marcus leaned in slightly, just enough that his words would be for Richard alone. You're making a mistake. Richard gave the kind of smile people give when they think they're humoring someone. I'm doing my job, he said quietly. Marcus straightened again, his gaze never wavering. So am I. And with that, he reached down, placed his briefcase on the counter, and clicked open the polished brass latches. Whatever Richard expected to see inside, it wasn't what was coming. The metallic click of the latches echoed faintly across the marble countertop, drawing the attention of more than just Richard and Amanda. A few guests in the lobby turned subtly toward the sound, pretending to browse the floral arrangement or sip their drinks, while their eyes stayed fixed on Marcus. He didn't rush. Marcus slid the briefcase open with practiced precision, the hinges whispering as the top folded back. Inside, the rich leather lining framed a single, sleek black folder, with the hotel's crest embossed in silver. It wasn't the kind of folder a guest carried. It was the kind reserved for executives, the kind that traveled only between boardrooms and corporate headquarters. Richard's posture stiffened, but his polite mask didn't drop. Sir, I understand you may have credentials, but as I've explained, Marcus lifted a hand, silencing him without a single raised decibel. You haven't actually explained anything. You've only assumed. Amanda shifted uncomfortably behind the desk, her fingers whirring at the edge of the keyboard. Marcus opened the folder and removed a crisp, bound document, setting it on the counter without sliding it forward just yet. Before we go any further, he said, I'd like you to look at this. Read the header carefully. Richard's eyes flicked to the document, but instead of reaching for it, he hesitated. Perhaps out of pride, perhaps out of disbelief. I'm sure whatever you have is important, sir, but as I've mentioned, read it, Marcus said, his tone calm but ironclad. The tension in the air thickened. Amanda swallowed, glancing between them. Even the couple behind Marcus had stopped pretending to be disinterested. Reluctantly, Richard stepped forward and drew the document toward him. His eyes scanned the bold letters at the top of the first page. Executive Announcement. Appointment of Marcus Bennett as Chief Executive Officer, Grand Imperial Hotels. International. For a moment, Richard's face was unreadable, his eyes moving quickly over the text, the signatures, the corporate letterhead. Then, faintly, his brow twitched. The color in his cheeks shifted. He glanced up at Marcus, then back at the paper, as if his brain needed to verify it again. This is... His voice faltered for the first time. Yes, Marcus said, his voice steady. It's real. I'm the CEO, and for the last 10 minutes, you and your receptionist have been telling me to use the service entrance. Amanda's breath caught audibly. The polite mask she'd been wearing since the start cracked in an instant, leaving something closer to panic in its place. Richard straightened, the stiffness in his frame now fueled by embarrassment rather than authority. Mr. Bennett, I had no idea. That's the point, Marcus said, cutting him off. You had no idea who I was. And because of that, you treated me differently. Worse. You both assumed I didn't belong in this lobby. Richard opened his mouth to protest, but no words came. Marcus closed the briefcase with a soft, deliberate click. I came here today to see how the staff at one of my properties treat guests when they don't know who's watching. The silence that followed was heavier than any raised voice could have been. The air in the lobby felt different now. The soft piano music still played in the background, but it seemed almost too delicate for the thick silence surrounding the front desk. Conversations at the nearby lounge slowed to a murmur. Guests subtly shifted in their seats, sensing they were witnessing something important. Marcus didn't raise his voice, but every syllable carried. When I walk into one of my hotels, I expect every guest, whether they're in a tuxedo, a hoodie, or work boots, to be treated with the same respect. Not based on appearance, not based on assumptions. Richard, the general manager, swallowed hard, his eyes darting briefly toward Amanda before returning to Marcus. Mr. Bennett, I truly apologize. This isn't about an apology, Marcus interrupted, his tone still calm but weighted with authority. It's about culture. Culture starts at the top, and right now I'm seeing cracks in the foundation. A bellhop who had been wheeling a cart of luggage toward the elevator stopped mid-step, openly listening. Amanda kept her hands on the keyboard, though she wasn't typing, her knuckles pale against the plastic. Marcus turned slightly, addressing not just the two in front of him, but the entire room. I didn't announce my appointment yet because I wanted to see how things operate when no one's on their best behavior for the boss. What I got was a first-hand example of the kind of bias that has no place in hospitality. Or anywhere. Richard's jaw tightened, his embarrassment now mixed with the dawning realization that this moment would ripple far beyond this lobby. Mr. Bennett, I take full responsibility. No, Marcus said, shaking his head. Responsibility is shared. You lead the team, yes. But the way guests are treated comes down to every single person wearing this uniform. He let that sink in, glancing deliberately at Amanda. Amanda's lips parted, as if to speak, but she closed them again, her eyes lowering to the counter. Marcus reached into his briefcase again, this time pulling out a slim tablet. He tapped the screen and, with a few swipes, a digital document appeared. This is the official internal announcement, he said, holding it up. Effective immediately, Marcus Bennett is CEO of Grand Imperial Hotels International. The words glowed on the screen, flanked by the company logo and the signatures of the board of directors. There was no questioning its authenticity. A murmur swept through the lobby. The couple who had been waiting behind Marcus exchanged a wide-eyed look. The bellhop's eyes flicked between Marcus and Richard like he was watching a scene from a movie. Marcus placed the tablet on the counter, letting them both see it clearly. This property will be my first order of business. Staff retraining begins next week. I'll be personally overseeing it. Richard nodded stiffly, the shame on his face impossible to hide. Understood, sir. Marcus's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer, before softening slightly. Make sure that next time someone walks through those doors, the welcome they get isn't determined by the clothes on their back or the color of their skin. He closed the tablet case with the same deliberate calm he'd shown all along. The point had been made. The silence that followed Marcus's last words felt almost physical, like a weight pressing on the shoulders of everyone within earshot. The grand chandelier above them caught the late afternoon light, scattering it across the marble floor in fractured glints, but even the shimmer couldn't distract from the tension. Amanda's breathing had quickened. Her fingers hovered just above the keyboard, as though she might start typing again, just to have something to do with her hands. Richard stood ramrod straight, the stiffness in his spine now less about authority and more about trying to hold himself together in front of an audience. Marcus let the pause stretch. He knew the power of silence. It made people uncomfortable, made them replay their own actions in their minds. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, but no less firm. Hospitality isn't just a job. It's a responsibility. You don't know who's walking through those doors. Could be a first-time traveler. Could be someone who saved up for years to stay here for one night. Or he allowed himself the faintest, knowing smile. It could be your CEO. A nervous chuckle rippled from somewhere in the lobby, but it died quickly. This wasn't a joke, and Marcus wasn't delivering it like one. Richard cleared his throat, his voice low. "Mr. Bennett, I'm not here to humiliate you," Marcus said, cutting in gently but decisively. "I'm here to set a standard. If this hotel wants to keep its reputation as the crown jewel of the chain, it has to earn it. Every single day, with every single guest." Amanda's eyes finally met his. There was no defensiveness now, only a raw, unsettled mix of regret and realization. I understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus nodded once, then turned to Richard. "Good, because this will be the last time I walk into one of my properties and feel unwelcome. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir," Richard replied, his voice firm but subdued, the words carrying the weight of someone who knew there would be follow-through. The mood in the lobby shifted, less icy now, more humbled. Staff members who had been pretending not to listen now exchanged glances that said everything. "We can't let this happen again." Marcus glanced toward the couple still waiting patiently behind him. "You've been very understanding," he said to them, his voice warm now. "Thank you for your patience." The woman smiled faintly. "Worth the wait," she said under her breath, earning a small grin from her partner. Marcus turned back to the desk. "Now," he said evenly, "let's proceed with my check-in, properly this time." Amanda straightened in her chair, suddenly meticulous in her keystrokes. Her tone was almost reverent now as she said, "Of course, Mr. Bennett. Welcome to the Grand Imperial." The words rang with a sincerity they hadn't carried before. Amanda's fingers moved with crisp precision over the keyboard now, every keystroke deliberate, her attention fixed entirely on Marcus's reservation. The polished confidence she'd displayed earlier had been replaced by something quieter, humbler. Richard stood beside her, posture still upright but softened around the edges, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. He was no longer projecting authority, he was listening. The screen blinked as Amanda confirmed the booking in the system. "We have you in the presidential suite, Mr. Bennett," she said, her tone low and respectful. "Top floor, private elevator access. Would you like a welcome drink sent up?" Marcus allowed a small nod. "That would be fine. And have my briefcase delivered to the suite once I've gone upstairs." "Of course," she replied quickly. Richard stepped in, almost eager to prove his competence now. "We'll have the concierge at your disposal for anything you need, sir. 24 hours a day." Marcus's eyes met his, holding there for a beat too long. "What I need," he said slowly, "is to know that every single guest who walks in here will be treated with dignity. No matter what they look like, no matter what they're wearing, no matter what assumptions you make in the first 30 seconds. His voice carried, not loud, but steady enough that every ear in the lobby could hear. A bellhop paused mid-step. A guest at the bar glanced over his shoulder. Even a housekeeper pushing a cart slowed down in the hallway, leading toward the elevators. Richard's face tightened, not in defiance, but in acknowledgement. "You have my word," he said quietly. Marcus gave a single nod. "Your word is a start. I'll be watching the results." Amanda slid the keycard across the counter with both hands, almost ceremonially. "Your suite is ready, Mr. Bennett. Thank you for staying with us." Marcus picked it up, but instead of immediately leaving, he turned slightly so his voice carried through the room. "In hospitality, first impressions last a lifetime. Make sure you're proud of the ones you give." The statement hung in the air for a moment, a simple truth that somehow felt heavier than a lecture. Without another word, Marcus lifted his briefcase, turned toward the grand staircase, and began to climb. The soft carpet muted his steps, but his presence seemed to echo long after he'd left the reception desk. Behind him, Amanda sat back in her chair, her hands resting still for the first time all day. Richard leaned on the counter, exhaling slowly. Both knew that the scene they had just been part of would be talked about in staff meetings, whispered in back rooms, and remembered by every employee in the building for years to come. Upstairs, the elevator doors closed on Marcus, sealing him in quiet luxury. But downstairs, the culture of the Grand Imperial had shifted forever.